We have quite a treat this evening with Kenneth Turan here to talk about his favorite movies in conversation with Lynn Neary. Kenneth started watching movies as a kid growing up in Brooklyn and tuned in often to the TV program $1 Million Movie. He also developed his skills of analysis at a young age, raised amid Orthodox Jews who practiced close, exhaustive Talmudic study. In time, the tendency to ask a lot of how and why questions became second nature to Kenneth. At Swarthmore College, he got to watch Hollywood and foreign classics on weekend nights. And at Columbia's Journalism School, he took a seminar in film reviewing offered by Judith Christ. His first reviews started appearing in the 1970s in the Washington Post, where he was a staff writer, covering also sports and other issues. And also some of his early reviews appeared in the Progressive magazine. But since 1991, he's been reviewing films for the Los Angeles Times. And as many of you, I'm sure, are aware, he's been a regular as well on NPR's Morning Edition. In his new book, Not to Be Missed, Kenneth discusses what he's calling his 54 all-time favorite films. Now, you know, here at P&P, we have a long-standing saying, so many books, so little time. And Kenneth faced a similar dilemma in trying to pick his favorites. Why 54? Well, I'll let him explain that one to you. But he found it harder than expected to limit his choices. And was so unsettled in the end that he couldn't resist suggesting a 55th film, or actually two films tied for 55th place. And then he appended yet another list of 54 more movies that he also treasures in an appendix to the book. In his chapters, Kenneth doesn't just critique the movies. He provides backstories about the making of them, discusses the actors and directors, and mixes in some cultural context. The films that he's decided to include and the ones that he chose to leave out are sure to provoke much debate. From the 1970s alone, for instance, which is a decade known for some pretty great cinema, Kenneth chose only two movies. Not among them were such memorable motion pictures as Star Wars, Annie Hall, The Deer Hunter, Taxi Driver, Jaws, and Apocalypse Now. Now, some of you, especially those who pay attention to our announcements, might have been expecting that Kenneth would be appearing here this evening with NPR's Susan Stamberg. Well, journalism being what it is, Susan is in California. But we have another great NPR talent here this evening to interview Kenneth. It's Lynn Neary, who, of course, covers books and the arts and is a frequent guest host, often heard on Morning Edition and Weekend Edition. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Kenneth and Lynn.
We're going to let Kenneth begin with, we're going to call him Kenny.
Call me Kenny,
Can we
sure.
call you Kenny?
Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead.
So we're going to begin with a short reading by Kenny, and then we'll begin.
Speak closer to the mic.
Okay.
Yes.
I shouldn't have had to use a mic, right?
Are these working? Can people hear me?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, great. I just want to read a little bit from, first of all, thank everyone for being here. I cannot tell you how satisfying as a writer it is to see so many people out here, so I really appreciate that. I wrote a little essay on the 55th film. It's kind of like the fifth column or something. And I just want to read the first couple of paragraphs because it talks about how, what this process of coming down to 54 was like. Deciding that 54 was the number of films to be included in this collection was relatively simple. Deciding exactly which films would be chosen was harder than I anticipated, especially as I got closer to the end. Much harder. I started with an initial list of more than 100 films compiled more or less off the top of my head, a list I added to after using reference books and other compilations to prod my sometimes stubborn memory. Rather than come up with an ironclad list of 54 before I started to write, I also decided to choose the films as I wrote about them, one at a time. I selected them in no particular order. When I was ready to begin an essay, I'd look at my list, decide which title spoke to me most strongly, what film I felt like seeing at that moment in time, watch it again, and begin writing. What this system did, though I didn't realize when I began, was give my inventory of choices a fluid quicksilver quality, make it, in my eyes, into an ever-changing, almost living thing. While some films were always going to be there, others gained or lost status and momentum as my mood changed and the list grew in size and shape. The closer I got to finishing, the more difficult, even excruciating, choosing the final films became, because at this late stage, picking one film inevitably meant another title would be left by the wayside. By the end, I felt each of the contending films calling out to me, pleading with metaphorical tears in its eyes, "Pick me, choose me, take me with you. Remember how much I've meant to you. Don't leave me behind in the darkness." Right up to the last minute, I was remembering and agonizing over new titles that I had not found room for. When Peter O'Toole died, I kicked myself for leaving Lawrence of Arabia out of the top 54. It was, as I say, a difficult decision. So I will leave it there. Thank you.
So, and I want to start, you were talking about your 55th, but let's talk about that number first, because
54, yes.
54 seems like an arbitrary number, but as it turns out, there's a special significance.
There is
to
a
that
reason
number.
for it. I mean, I thought it was arbitrary when I picked it. And then I realized at a certain point that it wasn't. I wanted something manageable. I wanted something that people, if they wanted to see all the films, they could do it. I didn't want to do 1,000 films. 50, some 50 alliterated with film, alliterated with favorite. I said, I'll do something in the 50s, 57, 56. Then I said, well, 54, that sounds right. So I picked 54. I didn't think anything further about it. And then friends are always asking me, how many films are going to be in the book? And when I said 54, a friend of mine said just like that, he said 3 times Chai, And Chai in Jewish tradition is the number 18, also the word that means life, as in the toast l'chaim. So 18 is a lucky number, and this is kind of embedded in my DNA, that multiples of 18 are fortunate numbers. And so I picked 54, I think, because, again, my whole notion with this book is to share these films with people. I mean, some of them people know, but some of them will be surprises, and I just want to kind of spread the good news.
And I want you to talk a little bit about how a nice Jewish boy like you became a film reviewer. And one of the ways you did it was by watching, as was already mentioned, the $1 Million Movie, which for those of us of a certain age who grew up in New York City was very significant. So can you talk about the $1 Million movies and how that played a role in your life?
Yes, well, $1 Million Movie was a program. It was every night, in New York, Channel 9, one of the independent TV channels, not a network channel. And they somehow had a contract to show old Hollywood movies. And they were really some of the classic old films. And I just didn't know that they were classics. I just was kind of channel surfing. There weren't a lot of channels to surf with in those days. But I was channel surfing, and I came across this program, and I started watching the films, and I liked it. So I started to come back and watch more films. And I watched them by myself on my parents' little TV, and I just kind of fell in love with film. I mean, that's really how it started.
My memory is that they repeated those movies over and over and over again. So some of them just became embedded in your DNA.
They
right?
really did. And the other thing that's so funny about this, I mean, one of the films that I did not see until much later in my life, till I was in my 20s, for whatever reason, I didn't see Gone with the Wind till I was in my 20s. And I literally had when I'm watching the film, it starts, and my first thought before I realized what I was thinking, I said to myself, oh my God, Gone with the Wind stole the theme music from $1 Million Movie. And then I said, wait a minute, no, it must be the other way around. But it had that great Gone with the Wind music to start the program, which I didn't know I thought, what a great theme song for a TV show.
So I wonder, too, because you do have a lot of movies on this list from the 40s and the 50s, a lot from the 40s, and I wondered if that was from that habit from way back as a child, like watching those old movies that you just got to love them so
Yeah,
much.
I love the old. I still love the old movies. Still when I can get a chance to see, especially on a big screen, or on DVD, if something that hasn't been in circulation for a while, I still love those classic films. I mean, again, putting this book together taught me things about myself. I didn't realize how much of a classicist I am. I just love the classic old Hollywood stuff. Not,
Yeah.
most people do, but this is really my sweet spot. This is the stuff I really like.
I was interested that your longest list is from the decade of the 50s, because that's not really thought of as a
Exactly.
decade of great films, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean,
how'd you
everyone
come
thinks
up with 50 with that
the
being the
50s.
longest list?
We all make faces. The 50s.
Yeah.
Country clubs and martinis. How could there be good films in this decade? And as I said, I put this together one film at a time. Till at the very end, I needed an organizing principle, and I said to my editor, "Well, I'll just organize it by decades and see what happens." And I was shocked to see all the films from the 50s. I said, "Oh my God." Just like I was really shocked to see so few films from the 70s.
Two.
I too. We'll get to that. No, but
I was shocked, too.
when I started to think about the 50s, I think the reason I like the 50s so much is that two things come together in the 50s for film. Number one, it's still, the classicism is still there. It's still they're making films the old way, like they did in the 30s and the 40s. But also, it is post-war. There's a kind of different tone in the air. There's a kind of edgy, more modern tone, less kind of happiness necessarily in these films. So they've got the mixture of this kind of edgy modern tone and traditional way of filmmaking. And I think it's that combination. I think that gets to me in so many of these films.
Well, I wondered too this is a list of favorite films, and I wondered if it would be different if you called it significant films. Would you have come up with a different list?
I probably would have, but that wouldn't have interested me so much. It's fun to watch the films that you really care about. And again, the notion was I just want to be introducing these films to people and say, you can enjoy these films too. You know what I mean? I mean, again, as a critic, you see so many dreadful films. You can't even imagine how many dreadful films you see. And I see less now than I used to, because even I got burned out on dreadful films. But, the benefit you get is that you get to see somewhat obscure films that people haven't heard about and haven't seen that are really good, that they would enjoy. And the whole impetus for the book was to say, look, that's why I snuck in the 55th film and that second 54, and each of the essays has a what to watch next. There are hundreds of films
that's
in
right.
here, and it's because I want people to enjoy films the way I do.
Well, let's talk about the 70s. Chinatown and The Godfather, which are great films. But why did you leave out all those other ones? You just didn't like them?
I like them. It's a question of, it's compared to what? I had to pick the films that I just, love is irrational. And some of the films I like, I'm the only person in the world who would like this film better than, say, Star Wars. And I like Star Wars. Star Wars is on the second 54. I love Star Wars. But somehow they just, I don't know. These other films called out to me more.
Well, I wanted to ask you about a couple of choices, and you mentioned one of them. David Lean, you chose Great Expectations, which I recently watched that movie, and it is amazing, but over Lawrence of Arabia.
Yeah, I mean, again, sometimes I think I should have put, as I said, once Peter O'Toole died and I started thinking about Lawrence of Arabia again and I saw clips on TV, I really said, you should have put Lawrence of Arabia in there. Again, this is a living thing. This is not carved in stone. On a given day, I might have put Lawrence of Arabia in. I wouldn't have kicked Great Expectations out because I love that film, but I might have kicked someone else out.
What was it about Great Expectations? I mean, my memory of it, and as I say, I saw it pretty recently. This was an amazing black and white film.
It's
what
stunning
struck
black
me.
and white. Yeah, and it feels very Dickensian. There are all these odd characters in there. There are characters that almost don't seem to. Like, what's this character doing there? Like the aged P, one of the character's parents. They're so eccentric. You'd think, well, no modern filmmaker would put this in a film. They don't do anything except be there and be eccentric. So it felt very Dickensian. The acting is really good. It's one of Alec Guinness's first films. It's a great story. The Great Expectation story is amazing, and it swept me away.
Yeah. And you said your favorite film, if you had to choose, Children of Paradise.
Yes.
Why?
Well, again, one of the things I found out about myself in compiling this list, again, these are things I sort of knew, but once it's in black and white, you can't avoid it. I'm very much of a romantic. I love romantic films. And Children of Paradise, it's a long French film. It's almost 3 hours long, but it's just a wonderful romance. It's about, three very different men. It may even be four very different men who fall in love with the same kind of inscrutable woman. And it's just a spectacular panoply. I mean, I can watch it. All these films I can watch again and again and again.
Well, that's one of the marks of a favorite film.
Yes.
Is that you can. And do you go and watch it? Do you sometimes? this happens to me sometimes. I'll be flipping around the TV and I'll come across a film in the middle, and if it's one I really like, I'll still be able to pick it up in the middle and watch it.
Yeah, and you can't tear yourself away. I mean, the one that's classic about is The Godfather. I mean, everyone has had that experience. You know, you say, well, I'll just watch 5 minutes. You know, I know this story so well, I don't have to really get into it, but let's see what happens. And then you can pull yourself away.
Speaking of romances, so you chose Love Affair, but not A Love Affair to Remember, which is the one I really know. I don't really know Love Affair.
I just like the original one better.
What's the difference?
There's no difference. In fact, they're remade by the same director. Leo McCarey did both of them. It was such a good idea. He said, I'm going to do it again. You know, and the second one is more well-known, An Affair to Remember. It's got Cary Grant, and who's, very appealing. But there's something about, I don't know, the 30s films. I mean, Leo McCarey, I don't know. I think his kind of romanticism was kind of purer in the 30s. And I just like Charles Boyer is a great actor, and that one appeals to me.
You said also, I think you were a little surprised by some of the actors that kept turning up.
Yeah, Lee Marvin is in there a lot, and I'm trying to remember. I mean, I like Lee Marvin, but I just didn't really, what's he doing here? And I'm trying to remember who else, but there are people who just reappear that I was surprised that reappeared.
Greer.
Greer Garson?
Greer Garson.
Yeah, she's in a few films.
Of them.
Yeah. She's in. There's a film that's on the list that I don't think I'm probably the only person in America who would put this on the list. Random Harvest, which is a classic weepy.
Yeah.
And it's just its plot. Even if I wanted to tell you the plot and give it away, it's so complicated. We don't have enough time.
Well, I have to say, Random Harvest was one of the films that I came away thinking I want to see that movie, and I actually went looking for clips of it on YouTube. I think, and I didn't find any, but there were a number of the little house or the little shop around the corner is another one I've never seen.
Oh, you have a treat in. I mean, you have a serious treat in store for you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not alone in that film. If you see that film, you fall in love with it, and it inspired. You've Got Mail. It inspired several films. It's Ernst Lubitsch who made these just incredible sophisticated romantic comedies, and this was one of the great ones. James Stewart and Margaret Sullivan.
So if there's one thing that they all have in common, could you think of it? And I wondered too, is it what's the most important element? Is it the script? Is it the director? Is it the acting? Do they all have to be there, or can one part of it be great and another part of it not as great?
Well, for me, we forget this, especially the way the world works, but film at its best, film was a collaborative art. And really, the great filmmakers have understood this, and it really is a fusion of all that stuff, I think. And again, sometimes maybe there's a film in there where everything isn't great, but for the ones to work, I think everything works well. It's a really good script, and that's really important to me. I really need a good story, and it's great acting, and the direction really brings everything together. So it's kind of like a great chef. It's like a fabulous meal that comes out.
I wondered about that because of Singing in the Rain is one of your choices, and I love to watch that movie. I think some of the greatest scenes in film are in that movie, but the whole movie the script is not fabulous.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange film. One of the things I found out, which I hadn't realized, I did research on all these films before writing the essays, which was really fun for me, and I found some interesting stuff. Singing in the Rain is what is known as a catalog film. It was basically the guy who ran the musical department at MGM had written, when he was younger with another writer, had written a lot of songs for varying musicals in varying places, and he called the screenwriters in and he said, here's all my songs, come up with a plot that uses all my songs. I mean, literally, that's what happened, and that's what they came up with, was the Singing in the Rain plot. They looked at all the songs, and they said, what can we do with this? It's Betty Comden and Adolph Green, who were the writers, and they came up with that plot. But again, it's just, it is personal. It's like being in love. Sometimes, you're falling in love with someone, and you say, don't you know that this person has this flaw? And you say, I don't really notice the flaw. And I think with the films I love, I don't really notice the flaws.
And when you think of that movie, you think of the great scenes. I mean, you think of Gene Kelly dancing in the rain.
And Donald O'Connor doing, make him laugh. I just saw that again recently, and you think it's a special effect. You say, a human being can't be doing that kind of dancing. Can't be bouncing off the wall like that. This is just not possible. But it's not a special effect. It's Donald O'Connor.
I'm trying to remember. Is there a Fred Astaire movie in there? Oh.
I almost...
Your wife would like you to move the microphones a little closer.
Ah. Is that better? Are people...
Both microphones?
Okay.
Yeah?
Closer.
Mine needs to be closer? Okay.
They actually said we could take them out of this thing. I wonder if we should do
How's that?
Maybe
Is that
that's
better?
Is that better?
We probably should have done a test.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
See if I can get it.
You can do it. We can do it. We know all about mics, right?
Yeah, we do, except getting them out of stands that we don't know anything about. When you got to the later this century and late 20th century, there were a lot of films in there that I didn't know at all.
Yeah, well, one of the things is that I didn't want to duplicate stuff from. I've had 2 other collections of reviews. One with it's got a great title. The book is called Never Coming to a Theater Near You, which I think is it wasn't my title. The publisher came up with it, so I really love that title. So I didn't want to duplicate too much, And also there's, again, as I said, I get the chance to see all these films, and most people don't, and I want to point out films to people that they don't know about, not because they're unknown, but because they offer as much satisfaction as any of the more well-known films.
Are you, in general, do you not, and these lists were also shorter as well. I mean, in general, are you not taken with contemporary film as much, do you think?
No, I like it. I mean, the one thing I'm disappointed in, really the reality is that Hollywood has abandoned us. The movie business we all grew up with just does not exist anymore, largely for economic reasons. Just not there. The studios are doing something different, and yes, they bring out the obligatory Oscar films in the fall, but this is not the business they're in. So, I mean, that's really a big, big change. If we didn't have independent films as we do, if we didn't have foreign language films as we do, if we didn't have documentaries, and really, I think we really live in a golden age of documentary, just spectacular documentaries being made, we'd really be hurting, because for adult audiences, I mean, not that adults can't like, comic book movies, but really for films that are intended for adults, the studios have let us down. You couldn't get Lawrence of Arabia made today. This would never get made. No one would put that much money into a film with that was intended for literate adults.
Yeah.
They wouldn't do it.
What is your favorite movie of this century so far?
Oh gosh, it's hard to remember. Off the top of my head, it's hard to remember.
Well, let's talk about one that's interesting, which is Spirited Away, which is an animated film. And you were on the judging committee at the Berlin Film Festival.
Yes,
Tell us that
this was
story.
a fascinating experience. I was on I like being on film juries. It's very interesting. You share views with a lot of disparate people, and you get to really help films. If they win prizes, you help them. And so I was at Berlin, and they did this film, a Miyazaki film called Spirited Away. And I'd seen an earlier film of his called Princess Mononoke, but I just, wasn't quite sure what this one would be like. And I went to see it, and we all watched it for a variety of reasons. People watch it, by themselves, and then we gather in a jury room and we talk. And I saw this film, and I just fell in love with it. It's one of the strangest, most beautiful, most kind of otherworldly films I've ever seen. I really think the man is, and it's not just me. I mean, John Lasseter, who runs Pixar, feels this way. This man is a genius as an animator. So I decided, well, I'm going to go to the jury room and I said, I'm going to speak up for this film. I'm going to tell people I love it. Everyone's going to think I'm crazy. They're going to think I'm out of my mind, but I just have to speak up for this film. So I get to the room, and it turned out every other person in the jury had both parts of my thought. Everyone said, this is too crazy for everyone else, but I love it. And, it was kind of amusing to realize we all felt this way. And the film ended up, it got the Golden Bear. It ended up splitting the main prize. It was a huge boost for Miyazaki in the West. I mean, he'd already been this enormous figure in Japan. And, it's just great, again, to help a film like that. And that film, I mean, I see it again and again. I've shown it to my grandchildren who fell in love with it. It's just an astonishing film.
Was that the first time that an animated film had gotten it?
I think so. It was the first time an animated film had won the Golden Bear. They're rarely even in competition, but this is a very unusual film.
Now, another Japanese film that is one of my favorites, The Magnificent.
Oh yeah,
Magnificent. Wait, the Seven Samurai.
Magnificent Seven.
Magnificent Seven was based on.
Yeah,
is again one of your favorites.
Oh yeah, I mean that's an epic in every sense of the word. It's a 3-hour plus movie. I think it took almost a year to film because Kurosawa wanted us to see the seasons changing, because this is what happens when a group of bandits live with villagers for a year to kind of train them to protect them against the bandits who are going to come during the harvest. It's got great characters. It's got wonderful acting. It's unexpected. It's got an amazing final battle scene. I think it lasts 20 minutes in the pouring rain. It's just an astonishing film.
Yeah. I went through a period in my life where I was unemployed, and I saw double feature Japanese films. I lived in New York. You could only do this in New York, and they were doing double features of Japanese films,
great.
and that was a great,
that's
great
a
film
great
experience
film.
for me. Another foreign film, and it's The Bicycle Thieves, and I think I always thought it was called The Bicycle Thief.
Yeah. They've changed the name. I mean, the name in Italian was always the same, but I think now people feel that the literal translation is Bicycle Thieves. Even though when it
Okay.
was released the first time in this country, it was called The Bicycle Thief. Maybe they thought too many thieves would scare people away. I don't know. But it's Bicycle Thieves. And again, it's interesting to see some of these films again because there are all these films that are classics. And I
Right.
think classics sound musty. Say, well, yeah, people liked it then. But what has it got to do with us today? But that was one of these films. It's just completely alive even today. You see it again, and you have the same feeling that people had when it first came out. It's just an exceptional human film. It's Italian neorealism. It's the start of a whole different kind of filmmaking, and it's heartbreaking. I mean, a friend of mine who's a critic took his teenage son to see it, and he told me that his son said, I've never seen a film like this, and his son was a film buff.
Yeah.
But he was a kid. He hadn't seen a lot of films. He said, where did a film like this come from? It's a very unusual film.
Were there any films that ended up on the list that you were surprised ended up on the list that you didn't expect to be there?
Well, one film that surprised me, will sound surprising that it surprised me, was Casablanca. I mean, I love Casablanca. When I saw it in college, I was in a room with other undergraduates, and there were so many people crowded into the room to see it on TV that it was standing room only. The first time I saw Casablanca, I stood for the whole movie. But I said, well, everyone knows about Casablanca. Everyone loves Casablanca. Do I have anything else to say about Casablanca? And I wasn't going to include it, maybe in the second 54. And then I saw someone had recommended to me a British documentary series where another critic had taken on his own was doing a film about the films and the filmmakers that he loves. And everyone said, oh, this is a great series. It's like a 12-hour series. But I said, well, I'll start it. And I put the disc on, and the first disc, he references Casablanca as a film that people think is good that isn't really good. And that so irritated me that I said, well, God damn it, I'm going to watch Casablanca again. I am going to give it a shot. I'm going to see what I think. And I fell in love with it all over again. And I said, well, I just have to put it in there. I don't care if everyone, it just excited me again to see it. And again, that's what these films do. You can watch them endlessly.
Did you rewatch all of these as you were?
Yes, I rewatched every single one of them. So I know they're all available either on DVD, likely on DVD, likely, streaming, but definitely all available on DVD.
And what did Orson Welles do to deserve a double feature there at the end?
Well, I'm just a huge Orson Welles fan.
Well, you didn't pick Citizen Kane.
No, it's on the second list, second
All right,
54.
okay.
No, but I mean, these are the films. Citizen Kane is a great film, and I really do love it, but I love these two more. That's what it came down to. I didn't want to have three Orson
tell
Welles.
us what they are.
One of them is Touch of Evil, which is a classic film noir where Wells plays an overweight, police. They're both overweight roles. They're kind of both Weight Watcher roles. Touch of Evil, he plays a corrupt policeman in border town. And the other one is a little harder to see. It's called Falstaff, or sometimes called Chimes at Midnight. It's Orson Welles as Falstaff, the character in Shakespeare's Henry plays. And it's just marvelous. It's a film, like many of his films, he made under enormous budgetary constraints. It was like cobbled together. He filmed it in different countries with different casts and different years. It was just impossible to put together. But it's brilliant filmmaking. It just, again, it sweeps you away.
One other famous director I have to ask you about, Hitchcock. There's one Hitchcock film, which I imagine that was hard to make. To choose only one. It's Vertigo.
It's Vertigo.
How did you come up with Vertigo?
I like Vertigo. I don't know. I'm fascinated by Vertigo. I mean, it's. I almost put, North by Northwest is another film I love. I almost put North by Northwest. But one of the things that fascinates me about Vertigo is its trajectory. When it came out, it was considered so-so Hitchcock. I've literally gone back and read the original reviews. Everyone said, well, this is okay. Wait for the next one. That's what the critics said. And gradually, over the course of time, critics came to embrace this film. And as some people here, I'm sure know, when Sight and Sound came out with its last list of the, critics vote on the best films, theory not their favorites, but what they think the best films are, Vertigo displaced Citizen Kane as the best film. And, it's a very instructive, what it says about how the differences in taste. It's not that we know more than the people know when it came out. It's just Vertigo is a very strange film. It's a very personal film. It's a film about obsessive, unpleasant behavior. And, God help us, that speaks more to our time than it spoke to then. This is kind of what we like. And I tell one of the things I say is that Hitchcock used James Stewart and Kim Novak, the biggest stars of the day, and he really, in the end of the day, he made as personal a film as anything you see in Sundance.
Yeah.
This is an intensely personal film, and I think that's why I like it so much.
It's also incredibly shot, and that's
Yes.
something that a lot of these
Yes.
films have in common too.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about Great Expectations earlier,
Yeah,
the black
yeah.
and white shots. This has those great, amazing shots looking down the tower.
Yeah, which Hitchcock, he was such a, it helps to have decades of filmmaking experience. I mean, he made, 50, 60 films, and he learned a lot. And he said he has this wonderful book of interviews with Francois Truffaut, who, was a big Hitchcock fan, and they talked for, hours and hours and hours about the making of his films. And he said the problem of how to get that vertigo feeling is something he thought about this problem for years. I think he was like dollying in and tracking back, pulling back or something,
Yeah.
how to get that feeling to make you uneasy. And the way he shoots San Francisco, San Francisco, it's a dream, we've all been in San Francisco.
Yeah.
It's not a dream, it's a busy, cacophonous city, but it feels very dreamlike. It feels kind of like a magical, strange city. And that's because that's what he wanted for the story he had to tell. So it's just impeccably made.
You mentioned Truffaut. He's not on this.
He's not on it. I know. No, I could have written 1,000 films. I really could have done it. It's not like, well, I can't think of more than 54, so I have to stop there. But I did want it to be, manageable, usable.
Yeah.
I want people to be able to read these essays, want to see the films, enjoy the films. That was the whole motivating force.
Well, I will say that when you're reading this, you're going to want to have you're going to want to have the DVDs with you. You're immediately going to want to see the films. I want to leave a lot of time for questions. We have about 25 minutes, half hour, so.
I have a question here at the microphone. Is this
Okay.
on?
Oh, the microphone is up here. I should tell you. The microphone.
Yes, and you're supposed to use the microphone.
Is the microphone on?
Yes.
I can hear you, yes.
Patricia Fenn, retired journalist. Thank you so much for coming. It's such a treat.
Thank you.
Can you tell us, as a professional, how you can separate bad personal behavior among the principals in a film, including directors, from their craft? I'm not going to another Woody Allen movie, for example, and then you meet them. I'm sure you meet people in person too, and that may temper what you think. But can you comment on that, please?
Yeah. First of all, I try very hard not to meet people just for that reason. I'm a little bit on the antisocial side. So it's not that much of a sacrifice for me, but I really think that you don't want to know people personally. You only want to think about their work, and if you meet people, that does influence you. I think what I think about people, I try just and think about the work. I also think that probably there's a lot of filmmakers that have done terrible things that we don't know about. And if I start to go down that slope, I don't know where it ends. So it's just an act of will. I just say, I'm going to look at the film,
Thanks for your very enthusiastic critiques. I'm, if such exists, a psychoanalytic film scholar, but forget about that. But I'm struck that your European counterpart,
Okay.
I think would have many more, quotes, foreign films, and you have, of course, a majority of American films. One exception there, no Chaplin. But what I'm really struck by is some of the what at least I prejudicially think are some of the really heavy, great European classics. No Buñuel, no Vigo, no Eisenstein, no Tarkovsky, and Fanny and Alexander for Bergman. Fun and light, but not. So I'm just throwing out my prejudices and see what you think.
Let me just repeat that not a lot of the sort of very classic foreign films have been chosen for this book.
Especially the Italians. You're very
Especially
light on
the Italians.
Yeah, well, I have Bicycle Thieves, and I've got actually Best of Youth. I've got at least 2 films from. Have you seen Best of Youth?
No.
Well, see,
Thank you.
there is another Italian film there. Again, these are my prejudices.
Yeah,
I'm
right,
not saying no, those films are just without value.
Right.
This is just what I like. This is what I want to see. Vigo, I have. I'm a big fan of Zero de Conduite. Almost made the list. I've got the one sheet from Zero de Conduite. I love that film. he almost was there. But again, these choices are not defensible.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
I mean, I really feel, I really feel that sometimes this is like, and this is, all my friends know this. My job as a critic is to try and influence you before you see the film.
Yeah.
Once you've seen the film, you have your own opinions. I can't change them. I mean, I always say it's just like, I really think this is very personal. It's like food. If you said to me, I like Chinese food, you wouldn't say to your friends, you're out of your mind. How can you like Chinese food? It's like that. And we don't usually think of films that way, but to me, that's the way they work.
Got it.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I'm glad we still have Paris. We'll always have Paris, because that's my favorite all-time film. As a documentary filmmaker who purposely makes films open up in theaters, what I'm really worried about, especially the young people, is they're used to seeing films on their computers. I can't even get my nieces to see my movies in the movie theaters. And it really concerns me. I mean, when I think of Lawrence Arabia on an iPhone, I cry.
I know.
No, I mean, this is what's
Probably
happening.
killed Peter O'Toole is probably that thought.
Well, it just exasperates me. And what are we going to do? I mean, for me, that experience in the movie theater equals every good film
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think there are two things that have to happen. I mean, number one, you just have to be a zealot, and you have to just drag everyone you know by the ears, and you just say you're going to have to see it, and you'll see the difference. I think people will see the difference. They just don't think they will.
But I think there's a phenomena of young people, because so much,
Yeah.
they'll even watch TV,
I know, but I think you just have, the other thing that I
Remember, he
yeah.
fell in love with film watching the $1
Well,
Million
that's what
Movie
I
on
was gonna
television.
point
On a
out.
very
But-
small.
but
And
I
actually,
found out
so
that
did
they-
I, watching on Sunday afternoons with my mother in Detroit. So it's sort of ironic, because I had the same experience you did growing up.
Yeah,
you
but
know, the
also, I mean, one of the things you learn as you get to be, our age, is that things come back. I think, even if the big screen, I guarantee the people who don't want to watch it on the big screen, their children will want to watch the big screen, in part just because their parents don't want to. This is too good a thing to go away forever. So I have
As
faith
long
in
as
the
the
future.
movie theaters stay
Yeah.
open, and we have
Yeah.
great success with the Avalon.
Yeah.
Thanks.
May I ask one question?
Sure.
Small one. Sorry in advance if I'm unclear or whatever. I'm a Tibetan and from India, and Bollywood is very, very popular, just like Hollywood. In the world, I would say like second from
Yes,
Hollywood.
it's huge, I know.
Yes, yes. So I have great admiration and all this beautiful scene on one side, but on the opposite side. Since you're this, I heard you're a rabbi or something, so I'm assuming. Yeah, because in
My
United
father
States,
wishes
you
I
guys
was a
have
rabbi,
great
but
author-
I'm not a rabbi.
Yes, yeah, really. People like me, after Dalai Lama, you guys are the ones who we trust more and approach to, really. Because the other government officials, they don't do anything. They're just equally business-minded or camaraderie and all that, blah, 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 whatever. So did you find, or did you ever notice, or are you aware of the scary things, ugly things? Especially I see a lot of scary movies. Do you ever voice against those so that they will not propagate that? And this is the country where we should begin, because pretty much everybody's imitating here, and it'll be like a wildfire, and later on we'll have so much to work on, and World War II and World War I would be nothing. The scale that's going on right now. Did you ever notice that?
No, look,
and
I am a
the reason
big-
I
yeah.
said this, I'm sorry, was on Discovery Channel and all that, really disturbing, like somewhere in Pennsylvania. They really fight, and they're using.
I think they're having a hard
Okay,
time hearing
yeah.
because of the
No,
microphone.
Yes.
I think...
So we should prevent that at any cost. The rodeo game and what is
Okay,
that?
let me just
I know,
repeat
yeah.
for
Yeah,
the.
worse than that.
Let me just
Okay.
repeat. It's basically a question asking Ken if he's ever spoken out against disturbing or violent films and the effect that they can have on society and on the larger culture. I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm a big, it's funny, there's some films that are in the book that were considered horrifically violent when they came out. Point Blank is one of them, that now don't seem violent at all. Violence has gone so far. I mean, I don't like violent films just for the sake of violence. I have written, till you write about this till you're blue in the face. It does a limited amount of good because, people make money from it. That's the long and the short of it. And also, if it becomes part of the culture, we go see it. Even if we don't like violence in theory, we go see it. I sometimes boycott violent films. I just won't see them. Really scary, disturbing films, I won't see, and I don't write about them because there's no way I'm going to like them. If there's no way I'm going to like them, it doesn't make any sense for me to go see them. So I'm troubled by this, but I mean, the only thing we can do is, vote, by not going. And even if everyone's talking about a new violent film, if it sounds too violent, don't go. Otherwise you have no power. Yeah.
Following up on the comment about the lack of
Can
European
you talk right
films,
into the mic? Just
following up on the comment about the lack, is too close?
Closer.
This
Yeah,
close.
there you
Okay,
go.
yeah.
sorry.
You've got to be right next to it for some
Yeah, I
reason.
think you have to be right next.
I don't know. I'm not familiar with your earlier books. I'd like to know if you have ever taken up the subject of Forbidden Games, the French film from the 1950s, which is so extraordinary, about the impact of war on
Yeah,
children
yeah.
and how children deal with the acceptance of death or trying to understand death.
Yeah, no,
Have
that's
you ever discussed it in any of your?
not
I think it's
that
one of the great films of
It's
the 20th
an exceptional
century.
film. I saw it. It's one of the many films I saw at college. I think it's an exceptionally good film. Why it didn't make it, I couldn't tell you. But there's a lot of French films in this book. There are more French films than anything except American films. And that one, for whatever reason, didn't make it. But I would heartily recommend it.
Okay. What about The Night of the Hunter?
That was very close to putting that in there. That was very, very close. I tell people it was harder to get the list to 54 than to write the book. Actually, writing the book was easier. So I regret Night of the Hunter, but what are you going to do? Yeah.
How long did it take you to get the list of 54?
Well, I did it gradually, as I wrote it. But I mean, it was a lot of agonizing. There was hours of agonizing and looking at the list and putting it down and thinking about it. And, it was just, it's hard.
You described some of the films you love as classic.
Classical, really. I mean,
Okay,
classical.
and what features of a film? What features does a film have to have for you to use that descriptive term with respect to it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think for me, I'm mostly thinking about films made in a certain era. The films made, in the 30s and 40s, some in the 50s. Mostly, a lot of them are, but even in other countries as well. But for me, a classical film, great interest in story. Story with a beginning, middle, and end, and you care about what happens at the end. This may sound like a given, but anyone who follows film knows that a lot of films today and a lot of films by really respected filmmakers are not interested in that, which is fine. I have nothing against them. Sometimes I really like them, but they don't have the classical virtues. Good acting, good direction, good script, good cinematography. I mean, in some ways, it's stuff that you take for granted, but a lot of films don't think this is important anymore. I mean, seriously. And so, again, to me, those are the classical virtues.
Any second thoughts about not having Paths of Glory on your first 54 list?
Yeah, I'm gotten very involved in reading about World War I, so I am having second thoughts about Paths of Glory, which is a great film. Just a great, great film.
Thank you both for coming. Your voices are like old friends
Oh,
when we
thank
listen
you.
to NPR,
Thank
so
you.
it's a real pleasure to see you both here tonight. My name is Stephanie Flack. I'm the executive director of the Environmental Film Festival here in the nation's capital. And I wonder about your comments. Thank you. Hooray, thank you. I wondered about your comments about the future of film really being with independent films and documentaries, and if you could speak not only from an artistic perspective, but the power of film as a social change or environmental change.
Yeah, I mean, I think film has a great, we all, in terms of environment, we think of Inconvenient Truth, which really seemed to have put climate change on the, kind of national consciousness in a way nothing else had done. When a film catches on, it's a vehicle of enormous power. Lenin was a big fan of film because it could influence people. There's a lot film can do, but film is fickle. You can't predict it. You can't say, well, this film is going to change the dialogue. It doesn't always work that way. But, I mean, it's great that it can happen. You just can't be sure that it's going to. Yeah.
Thank you.
You have a great selection in your book.
Thank you.
But
I didn't hear that, but.
Maltese Falcon, The Thin Man in Top Hat. Is there going to be another 54
I
more
agonized over not putting an Astaire Rogers film in. Again, this was just, it was a nightmare for me. Not because I thought I would, I don't mind, I'm happy to have the questions. It's not a nightmare for me because of people asking me, but it's a nightmare within my own head. Like, how can I leave these films out because I love them so much? Astaire and Rogers are marvelous. I'm not sure why I didn't put one in. And, I'm a huge noir fan. Maltese Falcon is a great film. I don't know. I think I put that in the second 54. I'm not sure. What was the third one?
Thin Man.
Thin Man, well, those are enormous amount of fun. And I was just talking to a friend of mine who, I guess there's 6 Thin Man films in total, and a friend of mine, that's all she does is watch these Thin Man films in order, and when they're done, she starts again. So these are very, narcotic films.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joe. I'm going to cheat a little. I have 2 or 3 questions. You're welcome to give quick and dirty answers. When you walk into a movie theater, do you prefer that the film had been shot on film or on digital?
I still prefer film. A lot of cinematographers still prefer film. There is an intangible quality that film seems to have that digital doesn't have. But I have to say, as the years advance, digital is getting better. I've seen digital restorations that I would be hard-pressed to know were digital. I think digital is getting better, but I still feel there's a difference. And I prefer that they were shot on film and screened on film. But again, in this country, there's this, for years people talked about the transition to digital filmmaking, not digital filmmaking, but digital projection and digital in theaters, and then it kind of happened overnight. I mean, really, I think almost every cinema in this country is basically showing films digitally. I mean, I think some repertory places still have projectors that they can use. But I mean, this projected film is gone. I mean, it's just like, whoops. So I think that I'm not happy with that, but I think it's happened.
And tell us, please, about, say, 2 or 3 movies that have come out this year you've seen that you like and why.
Oh, gosh, 2 or 3 films. 2 or 3 films that have come out this year. Well, one of the ones I think of, which has been a kind of an underground hit, is this film called The Lunchbox. It's an Indian film. Yeah, again, this you can testify. I mean, this is a film that kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, nobody thinks, well, there's a little film from India, everyone's going to want to see it. Doesn't happen. But this film is just a crowd pleaser in the best sense. It's just a wonderful, wonderful film.
Played several months here at one theater.
Good. No, it's done that all over the country. I mean, it shocked everyone. There's a Polish film called Ida. It's really a beautiful film, just an unusual, very artistic film. I really like that. There's a very strange film that's coming out. Well, I like the Philip Seymour Hoffman film that is just out now, Most Wanted Man, from the John le Carré novel. Mm-hmm. There's a very strange film, very moving, effective film called Foxcatcher that's coming out in the fall. This was won Best Director Prize at Cannes for Bennett Miller. This stars Steve Carell in a straight dramatic role. Steve Carell, I'm trying to remember the other actors. Anyway, Steve Carell plays a DuPont. It's based on a true story. A very wealthy man who became involved with the United States wrestling team, sponsored the U.S. wrestling team, and ended up going crazy and killing people. Mm-hmm. And it's a very, very dark, murky story, but really impeccably done. And, it's one of these awards contenders.
Right. And what did you think of The Immigrant? Don't give it away now, since many, I assume, have not seen it.
This is the Jan Troll film, the old film?
The James Gray.
Oh, the James Gray film. James Gray is very popular in France, and I think I will leave it at that.
Okay, I think
we saw 2 different movies.
I think we need to give some other people a turn now.
Thank you
very much.
I have only been able to see Chimes at Midnight because some anonymous person.
Okay,
I've only been able to see Chimes at Midnight because some anonymous person put it up on YouTube. And I think it played at the AFI here for one day. Have you heard anything at all about it coming out at all? Because I've seen it. It's brilliant. I know so many people have talked about it. But again, I've only watched it on YouTube.
That was the toughest of the films I had. Again, I saw everything again. That was the toughest to see again. The only way I was able to see Chimes at Midnight again is I have an all-region DVD player, which is not that expensive. And in Britain, it's available. You can go on, Amazon UK and buy Chimes at Midnight from them. And if you have an all-region DVD player, which is not that expensive, and I would highly recommend it if you really like unusual films. My understanding with that film was that the rights are in dispute, and then when rights are in dispute, these things sometimes take years to settle, because sometimes people love film so much that they think they should be given an enormous amount of money for the rights. And even if you love a film, it doesn't mean that everyone else is going to do it. So, I mean, these things get to be intractable, and I think it's sad story, but I think it's going to take years. But again, fortunately, we can watch the British DVD. Everyone should have an all-region DVD player.
Well, hopefully you can also order it from your independent bookstore as well as Amazon.
Oh, that's right. Thank you.
Bring the
I'm gonna
mic
take this
down.
off because I'm not tall enough. So I'm one of the youngest people in this room right now. I'm pretty sure.
You
I'm
are-
only
are you-
22.
Are you here by mistake?
No. No, I came with my aunt and uncle, but that's a different story. But you were talking earlier about liking classic films, things that kind of follow Aristotle's Poetics, that
Yeah,
sort of thing.
yeah.
Do you have any films that you would recommend that don't follow that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a film on the list that, again, I think sometimes it's very pleasant to discover films that you didn't think you'd like that you end up liking. And there's a film like that on the list. It's called The Five Obstructions. It's a very unusual film. It's a collaboration between two filmmakers. One of them is a guy named Lars von Trier, whose films I habitually have no use for. So I would have bet money that I wouldn't care about this film. But basically, he is friends with another Danish filmmaker, and this other Danish filmmaker made a short, like a 10-minute short. And Lars von Trier, being kind of the devious person, he says, we are going to take this film and we are going to destroy it. And he sat down with the other filmmaker, and he comes up, he says, I want you to remake this film in 5 different ways. That's why the 5 obstructions. And each way he set an obstacle to the filmmaker. He said, you have to remake the film, but you have to do it, you can't have shots that are very long, or you have to film it in a very terrible part of the world. And this is not a narrative film. It's not even a conventional documentary. You see the original film, you see the conversations between the two filmmakers, you see the product, you see the remade films, and you see them discussing the remade films. It's a film about the creative process. It's a highly unusual documentary, but I think it's as unconventional a film as there is in that list.
And one other thing, have you ever thought about probably writing a book about movies that you did not like?
I tell you, I mean, Roger Ebert did that, and I think to great success. I don't want to revisit them. That's, even to the extent of, even if I didn't see them all again, even to the extent of like looking over my old reviews. I mean, I take film very personally. I experience very personally, and to revisit films that make me crazy, they won't pay me enough money. There's not enough money for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. Hopefully I can talk loud enough. I have a question, but I first wanted to say that I wanted to thank you. I'm from Los Angeles, and I'm born and raised, and so I'm surrounded by film. And I knew from an early age that I wanted to go into film. And I remember reading the calendar section in the early 90s religiously. And my mother would get really angry because on Fridays I would take it from her before she'd get the crossword puzzle because I was looking for your reviews.
Oh, thank you.
If there's
Thank
one
you.
reviewer that I read religiously and have been, I would say it's you. And I would
thank
get
you.
very, I hate to disparage anybody, but I would hate it when Kevin Thomas would review the movies that I wanted to see. But anyway, one of my favorite kind of dialogues that I guess occurred that I'd never, when you're seeing somebody face to face, it's different than when you're reading about them, reading their on the page. But I loved I'm going to call it a dialogue that you had with James Cameron over Titanic, and that was really, I was still in high school when that took place, and it was just kind of shocking to me that.
Shocking to me too.
And somebody so powerful could just go at it with you, and you're a reviewer. And one of the things I love about your reviews is that, and I guess this is why I preferred your reviews and I kind of was drawn to them, is that we're very critical of most of the movies you'd see. So I'd know that if you liked a movie, that it was going to be a good one.
Thank you.
But anyway, my question is, what do you, when you're in that predicament where, and there was a back and forth going on, how do you deal with somebody? Not to say that he isn't deserving of his ego somewhat, but when you're dealing with somebody who's very powerful in the industry and clearly does have a very big ego, how do you go about it? I mean, I guess I saw how the situation took place, but how do you, in retrospect, what do you think?
I mean, I just said, for people who don't know it, I mean, I wrote very negatively more than once about Titanic, and James Cameron wrote an open letter to the Los Angeles Times demanding that I be fired. His last line was, forget Bill Clinton, let's impeach Kenneth Turan. I mean, I just have to focus, it's like the filmmakers whose behavior I may not like. I really want to focus on the film. You know, I just can't get involved with that other stuff. You know what I mean? I didn't ask him to, you know. And the ironic thing is that, you know, after all that, again, I saw Avatar, and I just fell in love with Avatar, you know, which really surprised me. You know, but you have to see it, on a big screen in 3D. If you didn't see it in 3D, you didn't really see it. So, I mean, I just focus on the films. That's why I do this. You know, it's the films.
Well, thank you again. I personally appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
All right, this is going to have to be the last question. I'm so sorry.
Well, it fits in quite nicely with that one, and it's much shorter. I wondered what you thought of 3D films and 3D technology.
I think that what I thought of 3D films is a question. I think it's overused. I think the studios saw a way to charge more money and to get us to pay more, and sometimes it's films that doesn't make a difference. But when it's used well, as it was in Avatar, as it was in Gravity, I mean, I think it is a tool in a filmmaker's toolbox, and sometimes it really makes a film more visually exciting. And again, as someone who loves film, I have to be okay with that. But I just can't, you know, they use it too much, and sometimes they just use it because they can charge you more money. And that's just, you know, I kind of saddens me because some people are going to, I was afraid that people wouldn't want to see Gravity in 3D because they'd been so burned out by all these films that weren't worth it in 3D. You just have to be, you know, an informed consumer. You have to go to see it in 3D when it's worth it, and not when it isn't.
Right, I was told that was the last question, but someone is looking at me in a very pleading way, and I cannot say no.
So, having gone through this process of thinking very deeply about, you know, what this list might be, what's on, what's off, I'm wondering if it's impacted the way you review going forward, like how you look at films today. Has this influenced that process?
Well, what it's influenced, that's an interesting question. It's made me more, you know, again, I really believe that at its core, and I don't know if other critics believe this, but I believe it, and maybe other critics believe it, they don't say it. This is personal. You know, one of the things I say is that, you know, God doesn't tell me what's a good film. You know, it's like, this one's good. You know, it's how we react to it. They're like people. And I think seeing how personal my favorites were really, I think, made me, you know, but it's hard to be so personal. And to, you know, it's hard. I mean, I've got a piece coming out. You are looking at the only critic in America who is not in love with Boyhood, you know, which is the most lauded film of the moment. It's gotten some of the best reviews of the new century, you know, and I'm not an enemy of it, but I just wasn't as happy with it. And, you know, it's made me accept, again, you have to accept who you are in this job. I can't make believe that I thought, you know, Boyhood was better than I thought it was. I've got a whole piece coming out on Sunday about what it's like, you know, to be the only person who doesn't like Boyhood. So I think that's what it did to me. It made me more at ease with who I am, which is what you have to be.
Thank you. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lynn, really.
Thank you. Great talking to you.